welcome to the winner announcement webinar. And today with me, I actually have a guest here. So most of you already know me. Hey, I'm Aivis. I'm a senior product expert here at ZoomCharts. And with me today is Stig. So Stig, introduce yourself to the crowd.
Thank you, Aivis. Hello, everyone. My name is Stig. I'm coming from Estonia. And I have to say that I like Power BI. So, yeah, actually, my journey with Power BI solutions started many years ago with Excel, with Power Pivot, and all kind of DAX and modeling. And yeah, today we have significant BI software called Power BI. So this is basically my everyday work. What I'm doing, I'm helping companies to set up all kind of BI solutions, making dashboards, and all kind of activities related to that. So that's me.
Well, there you go, guys. Right? As always, we're just trying to get some fresh blood in here so you get a different opinion on how, they look at things. And don't get, kind of discouraged what Stig just said. Yeah, okay, I like Power BI. He has experience, right? He's just being humble about it. He's worked in a lot of different companies as a BI analyst. And now he's a consultant who provides services to other companies to enhance their capabilities of reporting, analytics, and basically create a data-driven decision-making report. So other than that, so what are we really here all about, right? Let me just quickly share the screen. So what are we doing here today? Today we're going to the top 5 submissions for the latest Onyx data challenge, which was regarding the support cases, so technical support analysis. Now, the topic itself, it's something that's very close to me, because for some of you, as you know, this is also one of the part of the jobs that I do here. I'm on the support team as well. So I know certain things that I want to see. I know certain things that I have to provide as a result. So that's a different point of view for me when I'm looking at these sort of analytics when, it's something regarding things that I do every single day. So I'm a little bit more picky. But, I'm not, as you know, right? I'm not the hardest judge. But other than that, so we're going through the top 5. We're going to go through them, of course, in random order, because otherwise, what's the point of going through the top 5? Well, you know what's going to happen there, right? So all of them are going to be in random orders. And whilst we're going through these reports, we're going to be talking about things that we know or we notice that are essentially are created very good, something that we like the approach, we like the idea, we like the execution of it, or some of the things that we think could be improved upon. Now, remember, when we're talking about these things, don't take it too personally. Every single time you're going to be creating a report, there's going to be opinions. Even if you create a report for same audience, in the same audience, there's going to be one person who says that's the greatest thing that he's ever seen and he loves it. On the other side of the room, there's going to be somebody who said, nah, you probably could have done better. It's how it is, right? There's always going to be opinions. There's always going to be different things that you are trying to focus on. So take every single thing we say into consideration, but don't consider that to be, a rule. No, this is just feedback from our side. This is what we've noticed, what we noticed from our experience creating reports for different companies, different users, different audiences. So just take it into account, think about it, and if you like what we're saying or, showcasing, implement it. If not, well, keep it in your mind for another project. Maybe it's going to help you there. And of course, one part of the webinar itself is also we're answering your questions. So if you have something you want to ask about the reports that we're showcasing, or you see an implementation of something specific and you want to kind of, let's say, open up a discussion regarding it, feel free to do that in the chat section. However, if you do have a question, what I usually recommend to do is don't forget that you have a Q&A section, right? The Q&A section is there for a reason. It allows us to make sure that we're not skipping any of the questions. Because sometimes when people start a discussion also in the chat, it's kind of easy to skip somebody asking a question in between the lines, right? So if you have a question, send it in the Q&A section so that it's going to be easier for us to track everything. All right, before we start off, Stig, anything from your side?
No, I'm good.
You good? All right, we're all good, guys, then. So let's open up one of the pages that I wanted to use, and that's gonna be this one. So let me just see where it went. Yeah, it's a live session, so there's probably gonna be some technical things that we have to deal with, but no worries. We're gonna figure things out on the fly. That's not an issue. All right, setting things up. Just give me a minute, guys. Making sure I'm opening up the right reports. Otherwise, it could be a little bit awkward, right? I showcase the wrong report, announce somebody else. Nah, don't want to do that. So let's open up one of the submissions that is going to be in the top 5. So one of the submissions that has made it into the top 5 comes from Rigoberto. Rigoberto, congratulations. Rigoberto is already a seasoned veteran of the challenges, and don't let that discourage you, right? He also started off with one of his first reports here. The main thing we always emphasize on is don't stop yourself just by the fact that you didn't get a top 5 report on first try, or you didn't get, the best report. So what about it? Improve upon it, make the next one, see what else you can do, enhance your skills. That's what the sessions are all about. That's what the challenges are all about. So submission from Rigoberto. So let's quickly open it up and see what Rigoberto has done here. So from my point of view, the first thing that I noticed, right, is the tickets, which is fine. I like it. But the one thing that I noticed, and it might be just my point of view, but one thing that I would probably change about this is the order and how these tickets are being, the cards are being shown. The reason for this, let me just have a screen on the side as well. So the reason why I would switch around the sort of the statuses or the cards is because typically when you look at a ticket, you have a flow of how ticket is getting registered, right? So what I would have probably done is the following. We have 2,330 tickets in total. From those tickets, I want to understand, because as a support specialist, my first question is, okay, how many tickets are actually still open? Meaning that they haven't been assigned to anybody, right? They're just sitting there. So I would probably add open as the second layer. After that, you have tickets that are in progress, meaning that somebody has been assigned to that ticket, somebody's working on that ticket, that's an active ticket. And afterwards, you have resolved or closed, or you start to kind of go towards the end of the ticket. So I would just adjust the hierarchy. That's one of the things. Other than that, the fact that they're all on the side, I think is good. And it also allows you to play around with these different dimensions, right? You have a timeline, you have the agents, you have the statuses. So for example, I can quickly choose one specific agent. I can see the different statuses, and I can see how the tickets change. The other thing that you always have to double check is this one, for example. So if I chose a particular timeline, which in this case is the whole data set, I chose a particular agent, and I chose the status in progress. My question would be, if I filter these out, why is there still values in other cards? Like if I only filtered out tickets that are in progress, we can see everything adjust, even these tickets. So how are these tickets not getting affected? In these cases, I understand also what Rigoberto has done here. My guess, or what I think he's done, is he wanted to make sure that you don't get left with blank tickets, right? Because that's something that we've also told you. Try to avoid situations where you're left with blank tickets. That is correct. But it's also not great if you do a filtering and suddenly you still have tickets in different statuses and they're showing the numbers. That gives me a mixed data, basically, right? Mixed messages. I'm seeing that I filtered out only the tickets that are in progress, but there is 181 closed ticket, 113 and resolved tickets, and so forth. So just play around with the filters. What else? I like what you did here. ticket evaluations. So you can see, for example, also those ticket statuses on a timeline, which is good. You have the map visual, which allows you to group things. Again, with the map visual, guys, remember, one of the things that I've basically said to you a couple of times already is make sure you play around with the formatting options of the map. And in this case particularly, there is a setting called, let me see if I have it right here. So I'm going to quickly open up and create a map. So whenever you add a latitude and longitude, you have different points. I'm going to add, let's say, the count of ticket ID. There we go. And I'm also, well, even in this one, right? I'm just going to play around with also the min-max radiuses just to kind of emphasize on the fact. Okay. And I'm going to be going in smaller clusters. So the one thing that you try to avoid on a map visual is overlap of the bubbles itself, right? Sometimes it's inevitable, but if you can avoid it, remember that you have settings that allow you to control this. So the first setting that you can use for this is the node clustering distance. This allows you to determine the relative distance in pixels. So for example, if I increase it to 90, it's taking a lot larger area and creating a cluster from it. You can also enable aggregate node highlight, which allows you to see what's underneath it. Based on this one, you can see, okay, we actually have another issue. Like there's a lot of different countries underneath it, but because of the sheer size of the bubble, you can't really see it. So what you can do is you can always play around with the min and max node radiuses. So make sure you play around with these settings and find sort of like the middle ground. So it doesn't overlap with each other. You can still see all the data. It allows you to explore the data with the zooming capabilities and the cluster splits. Because what Rigoberto has done here, you can see it as well, the closer I get to the map, the more detailed information I get about the single location. So just take these into account. We have the information overlay, which allows you to understand how to interact with different visuals or what areas of the report are responsible for what. So for example, that's the navigation, that's the clear and help filters and so forth. So there is some sort of explanation to the user as to how to navigate the report. Now, if we switch to performance tab, this is one of the pages where I would do a lot, but small adjustments. So the first thing is regarding the donut chart. And this is actually something that a lot of you did. I understand the principle behind it, but just think about it from my point of view, right? So in the donut chart, you currently have reviews or survey results based on a rating, which goes from 1 to 5, all good. And then you have a number for it. So if I just give you a screenshot of this, how many of you are reading this number as 1,113? Right? Because there's no distinguished separation between the category and the value. So whenever you have the number as a category, because in this case, essentially, this is how many tickets have a rating of 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, and no rating whatsoever. Make sure you create a distinguished value. Whether you convert it into stars, whether you add just a little marker right next to it, you know, for example, the multiplication symbol, anything that allows the user to understand which part is regarding the category. So what is the name of the category and what is the value? Because in this case, it's one of the things that stands out, right? And especially if this is the first time when you're looking at a visual, I think you guys can agree with me that, for example, you would read this as 1,113, right? This is 2,128. It's just a visual thing. The fix for it is quite simple. You would just adjust the category names and that's it. It's fixed. So that's just fine. The other thing on the performance tab, one of the most important things that I'd like that you focused on is within the SLA or SLA violations. So any technical solution, sort of ticket solution or ticket analysis system, one of the things that you always try to understand is whether or not we're in compliance with SLAs. And that is specifically important if you're using a third party as your outsourced, basically, service solution, right? So you always want to understand whether they're responding in time that you have predefined for them. So these are some of the metrics that are going to be very important. What I would probably add here just as an indicator would be, for example, a comparison to, let's say, previous month or something like that. So you can see whether we're getting better or we're getting worse with this, whether it's a quarter or month, something that allows me to understand the trend of the SLA actual contribution. The split by days, so we can always use the same timeline, but focus, for example, on a particular day. In the same manner, we can split up by different agents. On a scatter plot, we can see it based on the time to resolvement and the average ticket rating. The one thing that I noticed here, and this is something that also actually a lot of you had, is if you look at the timeline, you can see here we have a quick card, right? That tells me that this is the time to resolution. TTR, you can read it from the chart, that is time to resolution, right? So you can kind of combine the two and understand what it means. So we can see that, for example, the time to resolution in this case is 111,000 hours, 535, which just seems a lot. One thing you have to double check, and always do this with cross chart filtering and everything. If you look at these numbers, you're going to notice that they seem a little bit off. So what happens with values by default, don't forget about it. Even if it's a pre-calculated column, it gets summed up when you're going upwards. Unless you define a different aggregation, it gets summed up. And this is what's happening in this case. The chart is good, right? The only thing that has to be changed is the aggregation, because you need to look at average times. A summed up time doesn't really tell me anything that adds value to it, right? So just take that into consideration. What else? I'd probably say the last thing is do not ever leave blank entries. The reason for this is quite simple. Well, we see that almost half of the reviews, that's because almost 50% of the tickets were not scored, and you have already scoring right here. But there's a slice that just says 1,157. Do not leave room for people to question your visuals. Just add a category name for it and say not specified, not scored, not defined, anything that allows the user to quickly understand, okay, what is this 1.1K? Why does it take 50% of the visual, right? Just a few things like that. Stig, from your side.
Yes, I actually like this report because it feels kind of clean. You don't have to spend much time to learn it, and this was the first thing I immediately noticed. Of course, every report were actually very good because basically all the requirements were met, but if going to pick on those smaller details that makes those reports different from each other, I actually liked this one and all the interactions. Maybe some details where, I don't know, some tooltips pop out, or as you mentioned, interacting on those donuts. Some calculations were not correct or seemed a little bit off. I agree, but yeah, I like this kind of clean outlook. Maybe some colors like those lines should be a little bit more separated, because we never know what kind of device person is using and what's the resolution on the device. So maybe those very similar colors seems to be like I mean, they are not going to be separated on the screen visually, so I would use more like different colors. But I understand the user wanted to keep the same design. But the background is purple, so all the elements should be similar. Yeah, that's also kind of good approach sometimes. And I actually had a question about this scatterer chart. I don't know, I was maybe doing too much filtering, but sometimes it was like, I don't know, kind of broken. Maybe it was because of I was filtering too much details on a report, because Yeah. For example, at the moment,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it should be working this way, but yeah, it was giving me a lot of questions like what happened, did I break anything or something like that.
Yep. It's one of the things that we always tell you guys, right? Just the fact that you add a visual doesn't mean that it's always going to be working. Make sure you play around with the rest of the visuals that you have on the page. Make sure you play around with different slicers. Because believe it or not, and this is something we talked about with Stig just before starting the webinar, you can create one of the best reports that you think you've created, but 90% of the time, the actual user is just going to find a way to break it. I don't know how they have this magical power, but they just figure out on how to break everything. This is why you give it to users to play around. And one of the things, of course, you might think like, okay, what am I supposed to do, right? We don't have physical actual users for these reports. Okay, you have your friends, colleagues, your wife, your mom, whoever. Just give the report and see what they're doing with it, right? Some of you might think, okay, but they don't know nothing about, analysis or things like that. Okay, but they're going to show you how they're going to be interacting with things. The human brain isn't unique, right? It's pretty similar to all of us. We do the same interactions. Sure, if we know how to use it, for example, I know the timeline, I'm going to automatically do a selection. That's because I know how to use it. But when a normal person or a regular person would do, he would probably, okay, what happens if I click on, right? And you see how they interact with things, and you start to understand, okay, how can I create a narrative with this knowledge that I now have regarding how to go through the report and how to go through the data. So just take that into account, play around with the visuals, make sure that nothing breaks, everything is still understandable, that you don't come up with cases where suddenly, you do a single selection and everything is clear. Nothing is visible. That is the worst scenario that can happen. Because trust me, there's going to be an email coming to you by saying, hey, I think we broke the thing. Well, now it's time to figure out how they did it. And one thing that I can definitely tell you, coming especially from support side of things, yeah, sometimes the explanations are very brief. How did you break it? Well, we used it. Great.
Yeah,
How
they
am I
are.
supposed to replicate it?
Yeah, that's how they usually are.
Yeah, right. What did you press? The chart? Great. That didn't help me at all. So you have to play around. You have to be proactive with these things. You have to make sure that sure, you cannot create a bulletproof case, but the more you play around with things, the more cases you can cover and make sure that it works at least for these specific cases. And whenever you get a new case, well, you see what else we can do about it. But yeah, again, Rigoberto, congratulations into getting into the top 5. And it's a great job. Don't get me wrong, few things that you can easily adjust, and it's probably going to take you 5 to 10 minutes adjusting category names and these sort of things. You can make it better, right? You know that. So don't get discouraged. Just make a better one, and get the trophy next time, maybe. Or did you get it? Who knows? All right. For the next submission, let me open up one of the next reports. And the next report is going to be a submission from Iris. So congratulations, Iris. Your submission has gotten into the top 5 for the challenge. So let's open it up and see what we can do with it. I don't know, Stig, maybe you want to take the first round on this.
Okay, so this was also one of the first report I was reviewing, and in the beginning I found it maybe a little bit like too much details on one page, even though if you start to learn it, you can find all kind of uh, information you would expect on a report, which is good. Also, interactions work kind of well, I find. Uh, but yeah, um, this navigation between those different uh, how we call them steps or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this this navigation should be maybe a little bit more visible, because I was spending a few minutes on the report and I didn't even notice there was this kind of option to select next level. And what else? Maybe some of the data could be like maybe the final step in the navigation should give a user ability to see the data in a table. Like I can see, for example, in this survey step, there is a table in the middle, but still maybe if I would need to see more details on a report, like to see a table row by row, maybe I'm looking at I don't know, analyzing something like maybe something really important. So I would like to see a table. Maybe I'm kind of old-fashioned because I've worked a lot on a tables before, but yeah, if trying to put everything only into donut or column chart, then maybe yeah, some important is missing in the end.
All right. Anything else?
Also, maybe the colors, like I mentioned in the previous report, maybe some of the colors are not like different from each other. So it's I would expect more like if it's a good, then it's green. If it's bad, then it's red or similar. So something like that.
Especially for these cards right here, right?
If they are basically the same colors, then it's really hard to understand what I'm looking at. But anyway, that's a good report.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Stig mentioned, just adding a little bit of color. Like, for example, right here, right, we have the SLA percentage. How many times have we hit the marker and how many times have we passed the SLA? Okay, I have 87%. I still don't know if it's good or bad. Usually a company sets sort of thresholds, right? If we're from 90 to 100%, that's all good because we do make mistakes. Everything's fine. We sometimes miss things. If we're 50 to 80%, that's, questionable. We need to figure out what's going on. Do we need to improve the process, whatever it is. If we're under 50%, how do we screw it up? And then you try to understand how do we do things. We go through the processes, we review the tickets, maybe it's the ticketing process itself. You want to emphasize on things which are important. And that's why as well, and for example, other resources, when you're going to be looking for data visualizations, you inevitably are going to come across IBCS standards, right? Which tell you that there's color green, there's color red. You know these guys already, right? It's just you didn't put a name on top of it. But you know that good is green, for example, red is bad, right? It's the color association itself. That's how people look at information. So just by adding a little bit of flair of color would allow me to quickly say, for example, hey, if it's 87%, we're doing good. You can, of course, come back to me and say, hey, but we didn't have this information. Okay, what have we told you previously with every single challenge? We give you the base report. If you think something could help you with the analysis, with the reporting solution, enhance the data, create the thresholds, define them. If it's something that you added from your side, remember, you have the information overlays, you have also other ways on how you can divide or provide additional information, and you give an option for the user to understand the thresholds. So why is it orange? Why is it in yellow, right? Why is it in green? Why is it in red? You provide the information for them. Like Stig said, there's a lot of information that you kind of want to condense in a single page, but you don't want to go overboard. Because the last thing you want to do is for a user to look at it and be like spending what am I supposed to look at first now? There's a lot of things happening right now. So it's one of the things. The other thing, I actually kind of like the approach. Maybe it's just because we've used similar approaches previously, right? But the one thing that I would probably want to have here is, and this is actually something I didn't see in a lot of reports, I'm missing a funnel chart. I want to see how these tickets essentially are progressing or currently sitting out. How many tickets we have in total, how many are in progress, how many are open, how many are resolved. So I want to see the funnel of how things are getting resolved, right? It's one of the things that I'm missing in a lot of reports. But the thing that I do like about it is that, for example, there's one card which is dynamic, which kind of threw me off at first, but it kind of grew on me, right? So every single time you switch between the pages, you can see that it adjusts or adapts to the information that you're looking at. So for example, currently we're looking at tickets which have received the initial response, which means that they're in progress. In total, we have 17% of the tickets that are currently in progress, and there are 400 of them. So it gives you a quick insight on top of that. Then we can choose, of course, the SLA violated or what time of the year, what hour, what product, what group, and so forth. So you can filter it out further on. Same goes, for example, if we go to resolution. So these are resolved, but not yet, for example, surveyed. And then there's two different steps. This is just my personal thing that I would say here. But when you have a survey and when you have a closed ticket, you would probably want to swap these. Because first of all, you close the ticket, and only when you have finished all the work, you ask for a review. Think about it like it would be your ticket, right? If I would send you and say, hey, rate the ticket, how do you think I did this technical support before I even resolve your question? You'll probably think like I'm an idiot, right? What the hell is he doing? So it's the same logic. First of all, you showcase, okay, so this is how we flew through the information, right? We opened up a ticket, we responded to it, we have them in progress, we resolved them, and this is how they're being surveyed. So this is how things are getting rated. So it's just a logical flow of things. Again, you can fix this in 2 minutes. Don't get too hung up on it. You can easily adjust this, right? It's a 2-minute fix, repositioning these and changing the bookmarks. That's it. The one thing, of course, you have the clear filters button, you have the information overlay. Here, I kind of felt that I would probably want to have a little bit more information, because currently it felt like you're using the whole page, but not really giving me all the information that I would require. And the one thing that stood out for me was this. I get why is it there, because it allows you to do things, right? It allows you to choose the agent group to quickly follow, whether it's the first line or second line support, whether it's a specific agent that you want to filter out. But the position and the formatting for it kind of gave me a feeling that it was just thrown in there at the last minute, right? Because if you look at everything else, it's sort of positioned, there's spacing in between these buttons, they're still aligned, they have a style for them. And then suddenly you have this one, which is just like, here, have it. There's a slicer for you. You can use it if you want to have it. Again, this is what I've noticed from the report. This is what I was talking about when it came to categories. I think everybody here can agree that if I have the stars in 5, I can a lot easier understand that now we're talking about a 5-star rating and it comes down to 22.89%, for example. Even if you would have numbers here, you would have a lot easier time. If you would add physical numbers here, so for example, if you would have the count of tickets here, I would probably just switch it around. Have 5 and then stars. Make sure you create a separation between these two, right? It's going to be a lot easier for the user to understand it afterwards as well. Other than that, I think it's a good job. It's clean. But yeah, maybe a little bit of conditional formatting just to kind of allow the user to focus on what's important. And yeah, stick on that. Other than that, it's a great report. So congratulations on getting into the top 5. And we're going down to the next one. So the next submission is by Inturi. So congratulations, Inturi, into getting into the top 5 submissions. So let's open it up and quickly go through it. No, remember, guys, if you have any questions, send them in the Q&A section. So for this one, the one thing that I was trying to figure out is, because I like the idea about the colors, right? But the one thing that was kind of throwing me off is, are the colors actually giving me the same message everywhere? We have colors here, okay, so that's color coded. Same idea is being used here. We can see the same color palette is being used for different statuses. That's all good. But then you have the map, where, for example, in this case, you have the project statuses, not the statuses, but the products, which isn't directly related to this. But if we switch to resolution, we're using the same statuses. And the one thing, it's a small thing, it can be easily fixed, right? But you can see, for example, closed is in the same color, resolved is in the same color, but then you have in progress, which is here in yellow, but here it's in light blue. It's, again, a very small little detail, but just making sure that they're the same everywhere allows the user to a lot easier navigate through the report and read the information. What else? This is a nice touch, but I'll be honest, it's similar how Stig mentioned about the navigation in the previous report. It didn't even click for me that this is something that you can actually click on. So when you look at these gauge visuals, right, it just sort of looks to me like, okay, it identifies different statuses, right? Low, medium, high. Okay. Turns out these are actually something, this is, I think, a chiclet slicer plobber, which you can use as a filter. Yeah, it didn't connect in my brain. It felt to me that this is basically a showcase of tickets and different statuses, but it didn't click in my head that this is something I can use for filtering. So just be cautious about doing this, especially using a visual as a visual identifier for something that can be filtered, right? That's
Yeah,
a really tricky.
I totally
Yeah, go ahead.
agree. In the beginning, I was a little bit distracted. Why is the status going around like high, medium, low? I was thinking maybe it should show like I don't know. My brain was messed up. But when I learned it's a button, I actually began to like it because here you have
Yeah.
different colors. Like high is a good, I mean green. Medium is yellow, and low is red. So easy to
No,
understand.
I
But
totally
there
agree.
should be something visibly like telling that this is a button block and uh, go ahead, press something, or I don't know,
Because
or
like Stig
some
mentioned as well,
reset
right?
button in the side, so you would like uh, understand there is a reset button. Okay, if I press something, I should be able to reset something. Maybe it's kind of logically understandable. I don't know.
Because before I realized that this is a button, I was thinking, well, it's one of two things. Either it's missing something visually that could actually give me a value. Like, for example, okay, we have high, medium, low. How many tickets we have in each and one of those stages, right? I was feeling that it's missing something. Once I realized it's a button, for me, it was like, well, that's just hella confusing. That's it. It's a great idea, but the execution could be a little bit better. And the reason for that is because you're creating a report which has already a lot of visuals. This makes people think that this is supposed to be a visual as well, right? That it's going to change, adapt to the data. And it was actually one of the first things that I was trying to figure out. Okay, what happens if I filter something out? Do these actually do something? They do nothing. Okay, what's happening there? And then I clicked on and realized, oh, okay, it makes sense, but I didn't get it at first. So again, play around with different combinations and everything. The report page tooltip was a nice touch to the reports itself. It allows you to tackle different scenarios. But one thing that I cannot emphasize enough, and that is make sure that you're not touching any of the lines. Like, for example, in this case, and this is what I've seen in a lot of reports, not just the challenge reports, in real life scenarios as well. You can see that, for example, 100, since it's 1 and 0, they usually have a particular line where they end up based on a font, right? You can see it's not touching the bottom line. But when you go to the next one, which is phone ticket percentage, 28.94%, you can see that 9 is physically already touching the line itself. So visually, it seems like it's misaligned. This is why you have the additional properties under cards for padding. So increase that padding, make sure it fits nice and neatly. It's not touching any of the edges, so it just feels like it's supposed to be there. Otherwise, the first glance, what this gives me is a feeling that you essentially created a shape, you added a card on top of it, and you didn't even bother by adjusting them. That's just one of the things that I notice here. Other than that, like I said, I like the approach that you have 3 different pages where I can go for either performance or volume. So basically an overview or performance, whatever I'm trying to focus on. The clear slicers button is a nice touch, but without explanation, probably not everyone would get it. It's just one thing I would notice here. Information overlay. I like this one. It's clean and it allows you to see what's in the background. This is one of the important things. And the one thing I didn't check before, but let me just quickly check it. See guys, this is one important part. And I've told this as well previously. Make sure that whenever you're opening up information overlays, for example, you're not clearing what the user has selected previously. So for example, if I select it, if I open it up, see, it resets to a default state. Make sure that the bookmark that you use for information overlays does not collect data or does not reference data. Just disable that data option in the bookmarks. So if we quickly go here, just so you guys know what I'm talking about, let's say I add a bookmark, this part right here. If you uncheck this, the bookmark is not gonna save a particular data filter or selection or whatever it is. It's gonna disregard all of that. Because the one thing that I usually do with this as well, for example, if I do a drill down and then I open up information overlay, I don't want it to get back to the initial state, right? I want it to stay there where I was when I opened it up. Other than that, I think it's a clean report. I like the approach. Anything from your side, Stig?
I think we have covered most important details. So let's have another one.
All right, let's go for the next one. So the next submission that has gotten into the top 5 comes from Toyin. Toyin, congratulations. Toyin is also one of the members of the community who has been in the top 5 countless of times. And one thing that I can definitely say is her reports are getting better and better and more detailed. Right? There are new things that she's trying out, and that's what the community challenges are about, for you to enhance your skills. So let's see what Toyin has done with this one. And one thing that I would probably do here is, Stig, do you want to take first shot at this? Tell us what you think about it.
Yeah, well, this report is kind of what I did. Maybe I will start. I will start with not liked details.
Sure.
So I noticed there were some places where selection of the visual was a question for me. If you, for example, go to this ticket volume trends, it should be the this one. So here, what we can see on the right corner, there are 2 columns, right? Yeah. So what is actually like? What is this visual trying to say to me? Is a little bit unclear. But same time, what I liked was actually this matrix on the left side, where you can see like those peak times on a daily basis. Like for example, Monday 15th, we can see 27 tickets. Yeah, obviously, if you click on it on the matrix, you can see.
Yeah.
You can see others visuals changing and reacting. So this is actually a very good approach, but same time, this initial state of the column visual on the right side was actually giving. I mean, it wasn't giving much information, in my opinion, but yeah, maybe it's considering also who is going to use this report, and maybe the team member who has already experienced and knows where to go, what to look at, then it's maybe not a problem. But in the beginning, I was not aware what should I do with this column chart. But all the other interactions I see, they are working quite good, and also the color theme. I like the blue color. It's actually a good selection. Maybe because of my personal uh, yeah, opinion, but all in all, it's quite good report.
Yep. And what you just mentioned regarding the columns is actually tied to one of the questions that we have in the Q&A from Rashmi. So I'm going to broadcast so you can guys read as well. So is there a way to make the drill down combo chart default to, for example, a different view, even though you have the full hierarchy? Yeah, you can easily do that. So what you need to do is go to the chart. So I'm going to make a new timeline visual right here. So, and let's say I'm going to add, based on the created time, right? I'm not even going to try to say that I'm going to create a new dimension table or anything. Doesn't really matter. And I'm going to go again with something like ticket count, right? So this is basically what we had there, right? If you have just two columns and if they're this massive, every single person in the data visualization world is going to tell you that's a no-go. You do not do this, especially since you know that if you check the data, there's only 3 tickets in 2014. This is not going to look in any shape, way, or form. So what you would do is probably go to a different granularity, right? Whether it's quarters, whether it's months, whatever it is. The way you would go around it is you go into the formatting options. There's a tab called Initial Display Unit. Once you open it up, you can see that we start off by top as a default option. You can switch also to bottom, so you're going to days in the hierarchy. But if you choose custom, you can choose which is the unit you start on. So for example, if I enable month as the initial unit, I can easily go between the pages because I want to give the chart a fresh load. And you can see that now this one shows me everything on a monthly granularity. I still have the full flexibility of going up in the hierarchy or down in the hierarchy, down to daily level and so forth. But I give the user a way to actually have something more information dense, right? Because we can still see it's not looking too great, but at least I can already do some analysis on 2023. Right? I just don't have one single bar that doesn't really tell me anything there. So that's one of the things you try to avoid. The more data you get here, right? Let's say 3-4 months go past, right? We get more data regarding the tickets. Then we can at one point switch to the yearly view because we have enough data to already have 2 different columns comparing to each other. But on initial stance, I wouldn't recommend to leave the chart like this, right? It doesn't give you a lot of information. So that's just one of the things. From my side of things, so when I went through this report, one thing that I like about it is the fact that it's not super crowded. There's a lot of different cards, but visual wise, there's not like tens of different visuals that you try to kind of navigate and understand. But one thing that I wanted to pay attention to and try to figure it out is, again, do the colors have any meaning behind them? And even though there's a lot of different colors kind of all around, right? You can see that, for example, high, low, and medium, those are different colors. But if I go under the donut chart, you can see high is the same blue, medium is orange, low is in dark purple shade. But if you open up tier 2, we don't have the dark purple one. We have dark blue one. I know it's annoying, but you always have to check your colors, especially if you're already starting to go down that route. Make sure that the same principle is being utilized everywhere. The small little mistake might seem to them, okay, what's happening here? We didn't have this one in the previous section. What level? Like, what does it mean, right? So it's one of the things that I want you to take a look at. As far as the other ones go, play around with some of the options on the drill down capabilities. Like, I like the cross chart filtering, that's fine. on the map, I like the fact that you paid attention to what I've said previously as well, is make sure that these do not overlap. You're not creating a hot mess of a visual. So it's one of those. As for the performance metrics, one thing that I would definitely play around here a bit more is the axis itself. So under axis, one of the values that you have, or one of the options that you have, is under y-axis, this one called zero line. So 3 zero line principles. Visible means that you're always going to be starting from 0, regardless of what the min-max value is, right? Let's say I only have values from 20 to 40. If you tell that the 0 line is visible, it means that it's going to still go down to 0. As you can see in this case, it goes down to 0, and then it kind of goes around with these values. And this is the case, right? You can see everything is basically between 20 and 40. There's nothing underneath here. By adjusting this to floating, you would allow the visual to detect the min and max value and scale the visual a little bit better, just so you can kind of focus on the differences and the changes a little bit better. Do always remember to take into consideration that it is not always the best practice. You need to understand if it fits this particular report, because every single time you have different bars, different scales that you're trying to showcase, it's very easy to manipulate with data, right? And one of the easiest samples for this would be something like this, right? Let's say we have a category and we have a value. So I'm going to have an A, B, and C. There's going to be B, there's going to be C. This is going to be 10, this is going to be 11, this is going to be 12, this is going to be 13. So let's add also the D category. Very basic sample, right? And ways on how you can manipulate the data and tell different stories, different narratives. This is something that you will definitely see in public statements, in governmental visuals. This is what you're going to notice a lot of the times they do. It's because it depends on how you want to present them, right? What's the message that you're going to give? All right, so if I showcase it to you like this, and I'm also just going to sort things in alphabetical order, ascending, there we go. So you can see, okay, basically we have a steady increase of 1% or one value, whatever it is, right? Okay, but if you go to the primary y-axis and, for example, do the following, and you say, okay, I'm actually going to be playing around with the floating. Okay, now this gives me a slightly different picture, right? It seems that every single time you're almost adding, in this case, you're basically doubling the percentage. Here you had like a 25% increase, and the same here. Okay, so that's already visual manipulation. So you need to understand what is the use case and how you're telling your story. And if you want to make this even more noticeable, what you're going to notice in a lot of cases, what people do is they create custom value ranges. So if I'm going to say that things start at 10, sorry, not 210, but 10, you can see that A is basically ground zero, right? We didn't have anything. Then we added 1 on top of it. Then we doubled the metrics, and we added like 50%, or in this case, 25% on top of it. So it's all about defining how you showcase things. Sure, I could say 10.5, right? Or no, in this case, 9.5. Same data, exactly the same data, just different visualizations and different ways of telling the story. So always pay attention to how you showcase these things. But other than that, I think it's a good report. It's clean. I like the fact that you also added the dynamic titles. I think Rigoberto also had the approach. Whenever you select something, it tells you what you have selected previously. This allows the user just to navigate a bit quicker.
How do you do those dynamic titles? Maybe somebody hasn't seen it.
So dynamic titles can actually be achieved in different ways. One of the ways is you can create a calculation, and the calculation can be, the simplest one you can use is selected value. So let's say title, you can use selected value, and let's say I was using table and category, and let me increase the size of this. So this is the easiest way on how you can do this, right? There's probably even easier. Maybe this is the easiest I could think of. What the selected value measure defines is that, hey, I'm looking for a value in the category section. If there is one particular category selected, return that name. If there's multiple, give me multiple categories, because I don't know what exactly has been selected. So if you create a measure like this, one way on how you can do it is you can always just create a card, right? I just lost my measure. Welcome to Power BI. This is a thing that you can easily do, and you kind of get used to it as well. But if we go back now, and if I have a table underneath it, I have a category. So whenever I select a particular category, you can see it adapts to it. But as soon as I select two of them, it's going to say multiple categories. It's one way on how you can do this. If you don't like to have it as a card, you can also go under the visual general sections, titles, and you can either have it as a title, like the main section, or in Toyin's case, what she was doing is she was actually using the subtitles. And then essentially, instead of providing a physical value, you say that you want to conditionally format it, you want it to based on a field value, and you define it based on the measure, which in my case was the title. So for example, if I select it, those are adjusting also dynamically. So there are multiple ways on how you can do this. One thing that you can definitely do is, guys, there's hundreds of videos on YouTube. Trust me, there's multiple variations of what I just told in a lot more detail. So if you want to know something, do not be afraid to look for it. You also have the community where you can ask questions. The worst thing that's going to happen if you ask about it and nobody responds is, well, you're basically in the same place you were before, right? Nothing happened. You don't get an answer, okay, but you have to figure it out. A better option is probably one of the millions of users of Power BI, and in the community you have thousands of active users. Somebody is going to tell you or at least give you hints on where to look for. So yeah, but yeah, so we went through all of the submissions. We went through the top 5. No, we actually have one more, I think. Yeah, we have one more, last one. I know we're a little bit over time. Sorry about that, guys. I'm not great with fitting into time frames. What can I tell you? So the last report we have that's in the top 5 comes from Rashmi.
One small comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
So creating dynamic title, I was asking from ChatGPT. Yeah, it gave me basically the similar function, or maybe a little bit more complex. But yeah, there are different ways to do it, for sure. So speaking of AI.
Yeah, right. All right. So for this one, the one thing that I want you guys to always double check whenever you are submitting your reports is what is the last stage that you saved. And this is just a small little thing, but if you look at this report, for example, if we open up the embedded version, the first page that opens up isn't really the first page. It's a small little oversight. Trust me, every single one of us has done it. I know that definitely I have done it. Stig, probably you have done it as well, where you accidentally just save the report on a different page, and then you give it to the customer, and the customer doesn't really realize it at first, and can be like, well, that's not the page we were looking at before. And you're like, okay, yeah, my bad. I'm just going to quickly resave it and send it to you, because you want to make sure that the experience is the same every single time, right? So just double check the small little thing that you're on the right page whenever you save the report, because when you save it, that is the page that is going to be opened up by default. It's not the first page, it's the page where you save the report. So always take note of that. What I liked about this one is that it had the filter panel. I like it. I think it's a very good approach on how you can give the user the ability to use any of them if he wants to, but you don't put them in his face if he doesn't need to. That's one of the things. The one thing that in the same manner, how I like this part, the one thing that I didn't like about this one is if you already have a timeline visual, which is on a monthly view, why do I need a separate slicer for months? You can use the visual as the slicer. There's no need for having another one right here, right? So just think about that. I like the fact that you were using icons in your text, because it helps people to visually relate to the information, right? So it's one of those things which you can just add there to make sure that they can go through it. The SLO violations, the colors, the fact that they were all unanimized is good. The map, again, a little bit of overlap. It can be easily fixed, but just take a note of it. the survey analysis, this is what I was talking about with the floating axis, if you remember, guys. Because now you can see everything kind of starts above 50, so all this space is basically wasted space, right? If you adjust the scales, the visuals look a lot better. And the focus on the SLA. Because like I said, one of the things that I personally, as a support team member, one of the things that we always try to understand and follow is, well, first of all, of course, how many tickets are open. We want to make sure that none of the tickets are sitting there without an agent. And the other thing is, how is our SLA compliance going? Are we responding in time? Is there any issues? Do we need to change something? So you want to focus on these numbers as well. Other than that, the only thing that stood out for me in this report was on the last one, for example, the SLA analysis. In the comparison to all other colors, these seemed like they were very out there, like very bright, right? These ones seem to be kind of fitting in. Like, for example, you can see the color green and red. They're sort of opaque, so there's a shade to it. But when you go to this page, that blue color is straight up in your face. So it felt a little bit out of place. Maybe just a different shade of blue would be working just fine, but that's what I've noticed here. You have, of course, the possibility to clear out all the filters. That's fine. And the information overlay, which has the transparency, which I've said as well is what I like. From your side, Stig.
Yeah, I totally agree. There were some views where colors didn't match with the first impression. One thing I actually liked was this filter. If you go on the left side, I think you can. Maybe you can use go with your mouse. Yep, to the left side there is a filter button somewhere.
Yep, filter button. Yep.
So yeah, this is actually kind of I don't know, advanced or clever approach to hide many options, especially talking about those slicers, because they sometimes take too much space on a report, so it's good to hide them using different layers. And I actually also like the contrast of this report. So if yeah, being in a dark or being in I mean, using a device where the screen is maybe not very good quality, then I think this contrast is maybe helping a little bit to navigate and understand what is. But same time, maybe some of the details are too much, but it totally depends on the resolution. So yeah, talking about this setting filters, like initial filters when opening the report, just a comment from my own experience. I sometimes find that users are, especially when the user is not very active with Power BI and is using the reports occasionally, then maybe I mean not maybe, but I find those users are struggling to understand what is going on the report, and especially when the report page is starting from the wrong moment, it could make people a little bit annoyed. I know that, for example, there is a setting in Power BI that you can turn those persistent filters off. It's already old setting, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Is it would you use it or would not? Because considering there are some of the users who are more experienced and some of the users who are more like
I'd say
beginners.
it depends on the customer.
Yeah.
But what I usually do is there are certain things that we adjust, like for example, although date hierarchy and those sort of things, because you understand afterwards why it's so important to work. But things like persistent filters and these sort of things, I like to keep it as is, because that is also what they're going to be experiencing when they're going to be starting their own reports. That is
Mm.
my approach for this. There are certain cases where we disable this because we understand that the user is fine with it. He already knows Power BI, so there's reasoning behind it. But as
Mhm.
a general rule of thumb, I like to keep things as default as possible, because I want to make sure that when they start their journey of creating their own reports, they can do the same thing. Or if I'm using any of the preview features or anything like that, of course, I don't show it in the report, right? But when I send them the report, or when I send them a message or email, whatever it is, I let them know that, hey, I'm also, in order to achieve this, I'm using this and that preview feature. So just so you know about it, so they understand also the playing field. Because the last thing I want to do is create a report which they're just physically not able to replicate themselves afterwards, right? But it turns out that the only thing they needed to do is to enable a preview feature of, for example, I don't know, modern tooltips, which is now available to everybody, but a month ago it was a preview feature, right? So it's always about finding that fine-tuned level of things. But yeah, I usually go with the default, whatever is there. I try to adapt to it and give it to users so they can do the same thing. That's my approach. But yeah,
Okay.
so we went through the top 5 submissions. I know we're a little bit over the time. I hope it was interesting for you guys as well. But the moment of truth, right? So who's the actual winner? So a little bit of a drum roll. And the winner is, for this particular challenge, is going to be Iris. Congratulations, Iris. You had the best report in this particular challenge. You're going to be announced shortly, and also a LinkedIn announcement. And remember, guys, the reason why we are also asking for your LinkedIn profiles is not just so we can stalk you. No, that's not the reason. The main reason why we're doing is because the mentions that you get in our galleries and in LinkedIn, everything are always going to be connected. We're not taking credit for your reports. You're the author of a report. So if somebody likes your work, they can just simply click on the LinkedIn profile and get in touch with you. This is also a way for you to network, right? So it's not like we're just doing just because. It's because we also want to help you to get out there, to get more opportunities, and to showcase what you can do. All right. Other than that, I hope it was interesting for you guys, and it was you learned something useful from today. I know that I did. I always like to look at different things. I also like to hear, other people's opinion on how things should be done, because at the end of the day, it's all about perspective, right? Different things are going to be covered by different audiences. Sometimes you want to make things flashy. Sometimes you have to go down to the details. It depends on who you're building the report for. So I wish you all the best of day that's in front of you. For those of you who has already evenings, for example, I have